And welcome to another episode of the Rational Standard podcast. Today's an interesting episode. We don't have a guest per se, except it's just myself and Christiaan van Huyssteen, another permanent writer at the Rational Standard, and we'll be here discussing a few issues on the show. So, Christiaan, welcome to your first episode. How things are going there on your side?
Well, thanks a lot. Things are going well. Yes, so this is a new thing. We've had the Rational Standard, the website, where we've been writing stuff for about 2 years, and it's been mildly successful considering we aren't funded by George Soros or the DA or AfriForum or anyone. And so we basically
all the Koch brothers
for about 2 years anyway, and I haven't been writing articles as often as I should, and then I thought speaking is easier than writing, and I thought maybe we should do a podcast. You've been doing quite a successful podcast. I mean, you've interviewed some pretty interesting people and you ask good questions.
Yeah, I've had some nice conversations. A couple of people have actually approached me to talk on the show. But the one nice thing about a conversation is that it's a medium where you're constantly exchanging ideas back and forth, and it develops some very nice things to be heard. And I think this is why podcasts are getting so popular now. This is why the Renegade Report has gotten so big. This is why the Ben Shapiro show is massive now, because people can play it in the background and do your dishes and so on. But
another thing, and I guess we're going to get to this, is that no one wants to listen to the radio anymore.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's true.
I'm sure we'll touch on that. So anyway, this is the purpose of this thing. Is the show doesn't even have a name yet. We don't even know if there's going to be a next episode yet. Hopefully it goes well. Hopefully neither of us get doxxed and get death threats and have our jobs and studies and stuff threatened. So yeah, doesn't let Eusebius ever get to listen to this. So we don't have a name.
I'd love to have Eusebius on the show, but I don't think he'd be willing.
No, but for reasons we'll get into, that might not. Yeah, but he wouldn't be willing because he doesn't like speaking to people with, educated alternate views. Wasn't that story that Ramon once said, or someone, that he had a guest scheduled? He was, kind of slightly anti-feminism, pro-free speech. And then Eusebius, 15 minutes before, and just cancelled it. And this was a true story. I think someone, although I shouldn't say that because I don't know, but I think it was some inside info someone had.
I vaguely remember something like that. I don't know exactly what happened.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
The funny thing for me is that the Renegade Report is now consistently downloaded, out downloading Eusebius Mackay's podcast in terms of South African podcasts on news and politics. He just kind of refuses to respond to them.
Yeah,
but look, that's him.
Yeah. Okay, but we'll definitely talk a bit about him because he's one of the topics. Okay, so this podcast, it's nothing specific or interesting. Well, it is specific in the sense that ideally this would become a kind of a weekly thing. And we'll just go over some of the 5 or 6 biggest headlines of the week and tell you what we think, because our opinions are so interesting.
Should we just jump right into it?
Yeah, let's jump right into it. Okay, so the first, if I can introduce the topics, the first one is, I think it took place early last week. Ramaphosa was in Parliament to answer his quarterly question session. And amongst other things, he told Steenhuisen to shut up, which I have mixed feelings about.
That was very funny.
It was funny, and it, in a sense, it needed to be done, but also you probably shouldn't do that.
Can I say one thing about that? Because here's the thing about our Parliament is that it's totally and utterly dysfunctional, right? Nobody obeys any of the rules. It wasn't always like this, but basically, I hate to single out one group, but it's ever since the EFF joined, the tolerance for breaking the rules of debate in the Parliament have become to the point where we really are. It's quite an embarrassment. So, this sort of thing is normal. But Steenhuisen, however, has been one guy who's consistently taken the high road, except in that speech. He really, in my opinion, sort of gave up. And you know,
I think he comes across as a clever guy with good ideas, etc. But he can be a bit annoying. I mean, whenever someone is giving a speech, then you always hear his voice like shouting and stuff. It's just it gets a bit irritating sometimes, and I don't think it helps.
Yeah, I'd be interested to find out where John Steenhuisen is ideologically. I've heard various different things about him. I've heard from some that he's a social democrat, but then I also see, you know, he tweeted that he was against the national minimum wage, which is freaking awesome coming from somebody as high up as him in the Democratic Alliance. Yeah. I'm going to be talking to a great economist on the Rational Standard podcast pretty soon about the minimum wage. I had an interesting few tweets exchanging with Gillard Isaacs, from the guy who headed up the research into the new national minimum wage.
Oh, okay.
But anyway, let's talk about what we're going to talk about.
Just for interest's sake, after having read Nassim Taleb's Skin in the Game book, as this person, what's his name? Say it again. Was he in charge of this research?
Gillard Isaacs.
Yes.
Yeah.
Has he ever been affected by the minimum wage? Has he ever worked for the minimum wage? Has his family ever worked for the minimum wage?
He was a PhD student at Wits University. I don't know. Like, I suppose it's
okay, but just for interest's sake, I mean, do you think he was ever in a position, or anyone close to him? Do you think he will be affected by the fact that people will lose their jobs, as a result of the minimum wage? Do you think he'll be affected by prices going up in small communities as a consequence of the minimum wage? Probably not, but yet he's the expert. No one bothers asking. No one bothers asking the people on the threshold, on the edge. What do you think? Because the workers of a business, they typically know what's going on. I mean, they know whether they're doing well or not. They know what it's like. Whether the business is doing well. So if you tell them, okay, look, there's all of a sudden all our wage bill is going to go up by 20%. I mean, people are smart enough to figure out, okay, wait, who's staying and who's going? Is this business going to shrink? It's just, they never ask the people on the ground. I don't think the business owners get any real input into this. Those with capital, as it were. And, just all these academics and stuff, they'll never be affected by the terrible consequences of these disastrous decisions, economic decisions. And it's tragic. It's ironic, actually, but also tragic. But anyway, we digress. Yeah,
digressing a bit, but that is an interesting topic to perhaps go into more depth.
All these experts, and they write articles and they go on panels and talk shows and stuff, and they're always wrong about everything, but yet we listen to them. Okay, but anyway, so the point I want to get to, back to the story, is in this quarterly thing, Ramaphosa said he thinks we need a state-owned bank, which is obvious. I mean, considering what roaring successes Eskom and SAA and Transnet and Petro SA and all the rest of it are, I mean, why not have a bank? What do you think?
Yeah. No, I mean, really, it's like, I don't know what to say anymore. It's like, how much more evidence do you need that's, I think you and I, Christiaan, on an ideological ground, we would argue based on theory as to why state-owned companies are naturally inefficient. It's because they don't feel the market forces which the private sector feels, and you can go into the theory of this all, but just forgetting all that, let's just forget all the economics and the theory that explains why this is. I mean, is there a single, what is the evidence out there for the current companies which are owned by the South African government? South African Airways is just a disaster. It's an absolute disaster, the amount of money it's losing. I can't believe...
They announced, what was it, a 7 billion rand loss? Last year, I remember a year ago we spoke and it was a 5 billion rand loss. It was unbelievable. Now it's at what point does a taxpayer or the government or someone, or the finance minister say, okay, wait, look here, this isn't working. No one wants to fly with SAA anyway. I mean, just talking for myself and most people I know, actually, I haven't flown SAA domestically or internationally in many, many years. If you want to book a ticket to go anywhere in the world, you go on Lufthansa or you go on Emirates or Qatar first. I love those airlines. you know, you fly SAA as a last resort because the planes are old, tickets are expensive, the service is crappy, the food is crappy. I mean, there's SAA is no one's first choice, except if you're a state official and the taxpayer is paying for your business class seat. So I mean, so there's no one wants to fly an SAA. If they don't get bailed out, they will stop existing overnight, and no one will be worse off. I mean, because no one wants to fly SAA anyway.
You talk about SAA until we're blue in the face. I think it's a classic example of what goes wrong. I mean, you have to understand the aviation industry, the industry of owning a commercial airline.
It's a disaster.
Extraordinarily difficult to get
and the margins are so tiny. What did I read one day? It's like you know, you make on a Joburg to Cape Town flight, they make like 80 Rand profit a seat. 80 Rand profit a seat. So
yes,
I mean, it's ridiculous. And then like what happened once to that Nationwide, then your engine falls off. The engine fell off the plane. It was like 10 years ago or something, and that killed the airline. Just like it killed their reputation, and it, you know, the insurance and the whatever cost so much. I mean, no one was hurt, but that's just the kind of industry it is. So, I mean, why the South African government thinks they can run an airline in such a competitive industry is beyond me. But alas, but as I think Frans Grenier and Leon Lowe and, you know, everyone says, they can't give up SAA, because if they say they privatize it or they close it down, it would basically be an admission of failure. It's like, we failed, we screwed up, we can't run an airline. So they just want to keep it going.
Yeah, perhaps that is the reason why they keep this zombie of a state-owned enterprise alive at all costs. I mean, SAA isn't the only one. I mean, you can think of any of the endeavors. The Medupi Power Station is one of my personal favorites. The overrun on that, I mean, you think about how many kilometers of road could have been built with I don't know if it was millions or billions of rand that went over. But anyway, we'll bring up these examples to talk about one point, and that's a state-owned bank. Now, hypothetically speaking, you know, something like that would presumably be, whenever there's a state-owned enterprise, often the thought is, well, we need one company that can provide the service, and it's not at the profit motive, so it will feed and provide for the people, TM.
Yes, well, Ramaphosa said, you know, we need a bank for our people. I don't know whether I'm included in our people. I'd like to think I am. But
I also would like to know that.
But I suspect I'm not our people. Yeah. Oh, by the way, the post office wanted to start a bank, and last time I checked, the post office is owned by the government. I mean, so are they going to have a post office bank and a government commercial bank? I mean, I thought the post office is also starting bank. I don't know how well that's going. Yeah, so I find this.
I mean, I bet post office is like kind of obsolete right now.
Well, and
now they want to start a bank. It's like,
yeah,
you know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this has been in the pipeline. I don't know whether it's going to happen. But I want to know whether Ramaphosa, did he just say this for like fun, or some political reason, or do you think he has like a committee or task force or something working on setting this thing up? Like, I don't know.
So basically, if you were to ask me, I think a lot of the rhetoric that we're recently hearing from Cyril Ramaphosa is electioneering. Think about something like the land expropriation. Think about the initial signed by the EFF, which does not believe that anyone in South Africa should have the right to own property. They believe that the state should own all property. And this is something which the ANC sort of adopted by this resolution in Parliament, which is not law, it's just a resolution. But the point is that you think about how populist of a policy it is. It's kind of like Donald Trump's border wall. It's like, it just sounds so good, you know, land expropriation without compensation. It's like this thing which not many people actually tangibly benefit from. If you think about these people the percentage of South Africans who actually wish to live on rural land is relatively, I don't think, very high. But it's a brilliant electioneering campaign because the issue of land expropriation is so important. I can't help but wonder if this is really all part of a grander scheme to get votes back for the ANC, which has been slowly dying. And I think it's going to be very successful. I think the next election, in my prediction, may be the first election I suppose, since '94, where the ANC actually gains votes. I don't know if ANC gained votes
I
in
think
the second Democratic election.
2004 was like their record, if I'm not mistaken. Otherwise, it was '94. But I think 2004 they had like a bumper year election. If it was '04, yeah. I think that's.
What do you think about that?
Well, I don't know. For me, this is more. I think the thought experiments about what a government-run bank, commercial bank, would look like is what I find so amusing and intriguing, even though I don't think it would actually ever happen. But what I can imagine is that they would set up all kinds of committees and have meetings and stuff and pay people massive consulting fees to look into setting up a bank, and then eventually at the end, after tens of millions of rands, they would realize that it's not worth it. I mean, Capitec is still growing. I can't remember what the figure is, but it's something ridiculous, like hundreds of thousands of new customers every month that Capitec is getting. And you know, I don't know about you, but I'm definitely not, you know, if the state-owned bank, commercial bank, opens tomorrow, I'm not moving my money from FNB to there. And I can't think of a single person who would move their money from FNB or Capitec or Absa to the state-owned bank.
I also have a concern with the concept of a state-owned bank, in that, you know, whenever something state-owned pops up, it immediately shouts corruption to me.
Yeah, well, exactly.
Now, you know, when we have a financial services board in South Africa, which is a department or an organ of the government, I don't know quite what you would classify it as, but it has enormous power to regulate.
Yeah.
And it's not, Parliament doesn't even keep it in check.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden now, that's the Financial Services Board, which regulates financial service providers. All of a sudden, the government has a financial service provider. You know, you put two and two together, and it's like, jeepers, the possibilities for corruption there are endless. And that's also a big concern for me.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's if it happens, it will just end up being a slush fund for the corrupt. But I'm just wondering now, how would this bank compete? Let's say, you know, what would they do differently? As a saver, would I get higher interest rates than I get from one of the current big five banks? Probably not. Will there be lower fees? Probably not, because, I mean, they won't be able to innovate. Where they're going to get the people to run it from? I mean, they've replaced the people at like Transnet and Eskom, all these places, with people I haven't heard of. I mean, all the best people, all the best bankers, all the best CEOs and managers, they're already in the private sector. So they're not going to find people who will be able to run it so efficiently to make fees lower and service better and whatever. That won't be possible. I mean, I think a big thing of this study was like kind of implying was the injustice of, you know, poor people not being able to get loans to start businesses or buy houses or whatever. Which is, firstly, I mean, they don't own land. The state and tribal, you know, the king owns the land that if you live on. So you can't kind of give your land or your house up as security to get a loan to start a business or whatever. That's something Leon Lowe talks about quite a lot.
Yeah.
And now, you know, so now are they gonna give out loans at much lower interest rates than the commercial banks are? I mean, because, you know, I'm sure that will end well.
Well, that'll be just, I mean, that is just, if I understand correctly, that's sort of what happened in 2008 in the United States, where you had these subprime loans.
Yes.
And I think, you know, I'm always skeptical of any sort of meddling about in the monetary system. And if the government is going to have these banks to be able to, you know, give out loans to people who perhaps don't have the best credit rating at, you know, interest rates which are lower than the market level, well, cheapers. I mean, it's like, you know, I suppose that the bright side about this is that it will be a state-owned bank and not the private sector. But how much money are you willing to lose on this? It just sounds like a recipe for disaster.
Who's going to pay for the losses? You know?
Yeah.
SA only costs 7 billion rand a year. I don't want to even know how much Eskom is costing the taxpayer every year. I don't want to, you know, how much is it going to cost to bail out this bank? And where's the money going to come from to capitalize it? From the government? The government doesn't have money. Do you think overseas pension funds are going to buy bonds for a South African state-owned commercial bank. You know, this is so ridiculous on so many levels. And as you say, this is what happened in America in '08. Interest rates were too low, and they gave out loans too easily to every Tom, Dick, and Harry who thought, okay, I'm going to buy a house and flip it. And, you know, people were thinking, okay, wait, my house is going up more in value than I'm making with my salary. So let me just chill, you know. You end up having home equity, and of course, at some stage, you run out of buyers. Interest rates are forced to go up, and you get one massive crash, and the housing prices collapse. And interest rates have to go up, although they're still being kept artificially down, which we'll see how that ends. But yeah, no, just this is a terrible idea, and I hope they don't do it. But they're probably going to spend lots of money thinking whether about they should do it, and they're going to probably start saying it at rallies and stuff. You know, kind of, it's just another form of welfare. And instead of saying we're going to get, you know, the ANC boasts about the fact that we have 20 million people on social grants, as if it's something to be proud of. The same way they're going to say it's just another welfare thing, you know, promising people free money, which obviously has to come from someone somewhere. Ends up being a taxpayer most of the time. So yeah.
Well. Anyway, I think on this issue of a state-owned bank, we've sort of ran through the mills of why we'd be against it.
Hopefully, we've buried
We've
it.
got a few other.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, look, we'll see what happens in due course. But I'm going to end off by saying that I suspect it may not happen. I suspect this may all be part of an electioneering campaign.
Well,
especially because this is kind of EFF territory, and you can see the ANC actively going to try replace the EFF's policies in many ways.
No, this won't happen. Even if they wanted it to happen, there's no money to make it happen. so I don't think it would happen.
In fact, on that topic, Davy Ruud gave a very excellent talk at the Free Market Foundation. I think it was only just a few weeks ago, or maybe it was about a month ago. I can't remember. And in it, he basically explained the budget and how things were looking in South Africa. And the broad overview that he gave was that South Africa is in a situation where we are extremely highly taxed, and we are looking for ways to try raise more tax revenue at the moment because we just keep spending too much. So, you know, that's a very interesting talk. Check out Davy Ruud's talk at the Free Market Foundation. Anyway, Christiaan, we have a few more topics.
Yes,
we
do.
About AfriForum. Well, look, I'd like to start and say one thing about AfriForum. I think AfriForum is a fantastic organization. I think they do really good work. A lot of people aren't aware that, like, the community, the help they give to communities. They have the AfriForum 911, which is like an emergency service. Things about security in rural areas, setting up private colleges with academia, solidarity. They're associated with the trade union. You know, it's actually a really fantastic example of civil society. I just find it, you know, and they have a few things which they do, which I don't really agree on. I think that's, when it comes to all the hate speech stuff, they should really practice what they preach. If they believe in free speech, then I'm not really one in favor of all this litigation that they do. But I'd like to say, you know, it's obvious that the media are out to get them, and we can talk about what exactly happened here. But if I were to give one piece of advice to AfriForum, it would be not shut up, but rather out the media. If a left-wing journalist who clearly has an agenda asks you to come for an interview, say no. There's nothing wrong with it. It's obviously not going to be a fair interview. Nothing positive will come out of it.
No, nothing good will come out of it.
There was no reason, in my view, for Kelly Creel to go on the UBC's McKaiser show.
No. Well, okay, so obviously the incident... Also, I concur, AfriForum is great. I'm not a member yet. I probably should sign up, get around to doing that, send them 100 Rand a month. Yeah, well, okay, the incident is obviously the thing that's been making the headlines, which is not really important news. I mean, I don't think it's important, but obviously, I mean, all the news places are jumping on it. You know, Eyewitness News had this as a sponsored post on Facebook. I mean,
that shows you.
That kind of
shows you what's going on.
What their agenda is. So Kali Kriel went on the Eusebius show, which is, in my mind, a poison chalice. because Eusebius does not treat his guests or his callers or anyone with the courtesy they deserve. He cuts them off, and he asks loaded questions. So he asked Cully a pretty loaded question, and I think he got exactly the answer he was looking for his own purposes. So he asked him, was apartheid a crime against humanity, which it was. I mean, in my opinion, given the
yes,
context,
I would say yes.
I would say yes, it was, and we can get into that now. Yeah. Anyway, so that he got the answer he wanted, but you know, the headline only read, Kali Kriel doesn't says AfriForum wasn't a crime against humanity, whereas like I think the very next sentence was, but I think it was wrong. So it's like it's a half truth in a sense, if not misleading, deliberately misleading, I'd say on the part of most media organizations.
Well, it was really the quote that the media was hoping to get out of AfriForum. I think it was very unfortunate that Kali Kriel
fell for it.
That answer. He gave this whole explanation afterwards, and
that no one listened to.
You know, it's bad. I don't like it. If he does hold that view, I think it's unfortunate. But you know, we discussed a bit on the chat group. Could it have been the language barrier? He's not the spokesman. Ernst Ritz is the spokesman. And I think there's a reason that Ernst is the spokesman. It's because he's got the silver tongue and he knows how to handle interviewers like that.
I will.
But I'll go ahead.
No, just as you say, the language thing, and it's something people underestimate. And I'm not saying this was the case or that's, you know, you didn't mean it or whatever. But I'm Afrikaans and I went to English high school, and the language thing is still sometimes for me, you use words which aren't like 100% correct for what you're saying. And when you're talking about a serious subject, then it could cause you trouble. But yeah, the language thing is definitely, it's not straightforward that someone who's English, if English isn't their native language or their first language, then it's what they say and what they mean aren't always going to be exactly precise. Yeah,
you know, who knows? And I don't know how Kali Kriel feels speaking English, but even like you've just said, you know, if I were to listen, your English accent sounds just like mine. It doesn't sound. I wouldn't detect that you were Afrikaans unless I knew your surname was Van Huyssteen.
Yeah. And
you even say that, you know, sometimes there are problems. And, you know, some linguists say that you'll never even... Look, okay, I'm beating a dead horse on this issue.
Yeah.
But let's move beyond this, because here's the thing. The media obviously wanted to get this out of. Eusebius was clearly... Why would he invite these guys on the show after they'd just been on this successful tour of America? And this, for me, is the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
AfriForum leaves the country, okay? First thing that happens, Huffington Post writes an article about it. It's like jeepers, like, well, you know, you've obviously got an axe to grind here. And this is what I think we saw over AfriForum's tour of America. They were incredibly successful. They met with members of the Trump administration. They got on Tucker Carlson, which is one of the most watched news shows in America. I think it might be the most watched.
I think it's the most watched,
yeah. Well, it's a big deal. I mean, everybody knows Tucker Carlson in America. And so obviously people back home were losing their minds about it. So for me, this is an obvious pushback of an organization with more conservative leanings becoming successful. And it's showing that actually, while they may be very ostracized in South Africa, what they're sort of talking about is quite normal in a lot of places which are much more successful in South Africa. And I think this is very threatening to the media. And so it's quite necessary that they get Kali Kriel to come on and ask him a load of questions, so that they can sponsor a headline that says Kali Kriel thinks that apartheid was not a crime against humanity, and that's it.
I mean, I didn't listen. I didn't listen to the whole thing, and I don't know how much they actually touched on, you know, the actual trip to America. I mean, because it was about farm murders, which, believe it or not, is actually a major issue.
And land.
And land. And you know, they met with Michael Bolton, not my favorite person, but he's Trump's national security advisor. I mean, that's a big deal.
John Bolton, you mean?
Was it John? What did I say? John Bolton?
Michael Bolton.
Oh, not Michael Bolton. I apologize. I mean John Bolton. I mean John Bolton. And they met with Ted Cruz, who's like senior senator. He's a senator, right?
I don't think I'm sorry to interrupt. I don't think they actually met with Ted Cruz, but they were at his office. I never saw.
No, man, I'm sure I saw.
They were a little bit careful about that.
Wasn't there a picture of them together or something? Okay, but either way, they met with the President of America's National Security Advisor. They met with a senior congressman and or his team. And they were on the largest evening news talk show in America. On Fox News primetime. And I mean, surely that's the more obvious conversation to have, rather than asking someone whether apartheid was a crime against humanity. Unless it's a loaded question and you have a bit of an agenda asking it.
Yeah, look, the aim of the media here was very clear. And so now, okay, so where do we move forward from this is actually very good. I think, the last episode of the Renegade Report where they gave advice to the DA, I think a lot of that can be applied to Afriforum.
Yeah.
Afriforum does very good work. It's not in their interest to talk to left-wing journalists who have a clear political look to get them to say bad things.
Yeah.
In my opinion, they should not care what the media really says about them. Their members, how many members does Afriforum have? Okay, now compare
200,000 plus.
Positive 200,000 plus. That's enormous. I mean, I don't know what percentage of the Afrikaans-speaking population of South Africa that it is, but it's a sizable chunk.
Yeah.
And now compare that with how much positive media attention does Afriforum get? Very, very little.
Can I?
So what we can tell from this is that there.
Yeah. Sorry, just to jump in. I think their subscription or their numbers have increased disproportionately this week. Things like this, I think, gets them more money. So that's just my gut feel. But anyway, carry on. Sorry.
No, so what I was saying is that if you think about the amount of positive media attention Afriforum gets, is extraordinarily little.
Yeah.
And yet the amount that they've grown since their founding up until now and how successful they've been, what it shows is that the media obviously doesn't like them very much. They're very concerned that Afriforum is going to be successful, and that scares them a lot. But I think it's to their benefit to just sort of keep to themselves and not really care. They must really not give a crap what the Huffington Post writes, even if they do write 10 articles in a row. Adam Stritz is very keen on responding to people. He's quite a warrior on Twitter. Sometimes there's some very good remarks that he makes. But if I had to give one piece of advice to him, I would say, Afriforum must just really not take crap anymore from the media. They must keep to themselves unless they know that any sort of interview that they're going to get is going to be going to give them a fair shot and a fair hearing. Yeah. And that's, I think, the only way to avoid incidents like this Karikari on Eusebius show again. Because no doubt, I can say to you right now, Christiaan, do you think the Holocaust was the worst event in history? And you can say no, and it makes you sound like a horrible anti-Semite.
Exactly.
But the question is just not that simple.
Yeah. Is the Holocaust the worst thing ever? Possibly one of the worst things ever. Absolutely. One of the most horrible things in history. Yes, definitely. So, but I mean, so that's what it comes down to. So if you ask crimes against humanity, I mean, if you think about it carefully, that's a pretty, apartheid was a crime against humanity, right? It was terrible. Yes. It was wrong. It was very wrong. I mean, I don't know, no serious person would say apartheid wasn't horrible and, okay, but anyway, but then can we ask, was what Mugabe did to the farmers and between the various tribes of Zimbabwe, was that a crime against humanity? In my opinion, yes. Is it being labeled as that? I don't know. What's that guy, the Sudanese guy who Zuma's buddies with? Bashar someone?
I've forgotten the name.
That guy,
Assad is in Syria.
Yes, it's a Bashar something, I think, right? But that guy, he was illegally in the country and we didn't arrest him as we legally should have. We
had Hamas.
Yeah, we had Hamas. Do those people, do they not commit crimes against humanity? Are they known for their crimes against humanity, or do we just say no, they just abuse human rights every now and then? I mean, so the term itself is a bit loaded and it's a bit too political and a bit not subjective enough. I mean, do we say what Che Guevara did? Was that crimes against humanity? In my opinion, yes. So I know people who still wear his face on their t-shirt. Yeah, I think he committed some crimes against humanity. So I think it's not obvious what you mean by crimes against humanity, and Eusebius fell into that. Kali Kriel fell into that trap, and Eusebius got what he wanted. I mean, Gaddafi, does he commit crimes against humanity? Probably yes. Did Obama commit a crime against humanity by overthrowing him and leaving Libya in chaos? I think so. You know, where does
it's
it
like
end?
you could go ad infinitum.
You can go forever. So that's why I think, you know, people maybe a bit emotional. Maybe they don't think clearly enough about what exactly they mean and what exactly the implications are. Anyway, but that's what I have to say about it. I don't know. What do you think?
So basically, I would end off this by just saying, you know, this was a case where the media is obviously out to get Afi for him.
Yeah.
And there's a very clear way forward, in my view, and that's that they must just not give a crap about what the media says. And then if a journalist in the vein of Eusebius Makaiser asks for an interview, they must say no, because what good will that possibly do for them?
No.
It's like if somebody said, "Hi, we'd like to interview you so that we can give you a bad name," would you say yes or no to that?
Exactly.
Just say no.
Just say no. And, if I can just add one thing about the Eusebius show, maybe getting a little bit. John Robbie, because I listened to him on my way to school every morning for 12 years. He recently tweeted something. I think he used the word "something is very wrong" at 7:02. Jeremy Mansfield, who was also at 7:02 at one point, he said he's not getting good vibes. You know, lots of good people leaving 7:02. There's something wrong. And I mean, and they didn't use the word Eusebius Makaiser or the name, but you could see that's what they meant. And the comments on those things were like, everyone was agreeing. They're like, no, I'm listening to podcasts. I'm listening to music. I love Bruce Whitfield, but I'm not listening to 7:02 during the day anymore. And, you know, I just can't take Eusebius. That's what it came down to. So, I mean, they're losing listenership. Their parent company, Prime Media, whose biggest investor is Brait. Brait wants to sell Prime Media. I mean, I don't know whether Prime Media is a profitable business anymore, but I think 7:02 and the likes of Eusebius, I think they're losing ratings and listenership. I don't know if that's just my perception, but you know, people saying things are wrong there, and I believe them. I think things are wrong, and I think they're going downhill for a reason. So
yeah, well, you know, it's certainly taken a turn from the days of John Robbie. But you know, personally, I would not be sad to necessarily see radio as we know it kind of fade into a bit more of obscurity. And this is not because I detest radio. I listen to SAFM and RSG every single day in the car. But perhaps that shows you it's in the car already that I listen to it. And I think the internet is going to become more and more prominent. But it's quite interesting what you say about 7:02. I haven't heard those things yet, but there might be a bit of a swing now, which might have happened, you know, as a result of the broader sort of polarization in South African politics.
Mm. Well, that's a feeling I'm getting. Maybe I'm wrong. I mean, when I drive, I listen to classic FM or fine music radio or something lighthearted, or I listen to podcasts on my headphones or on Bluetooth or something. So anyway, but that's me. So
cool. Well, we're at about half an hour. Should we start to wrap things up?
Maybe. Okay, we've got 3 more topics, which I am very relatively ignorant on, so we can maybe jump through them quickly, if you'd like.
Yeah.
Okay, Israel. We've had it's just, you know, I want to cover the most important things of the week. And okay, ons is 'n bietjie langdradig, but okay. So Israel's the next one. We've had the sad tragedy of Israel. Apparently, look, I don't know what's going on, and I'm not an expert, but I don't think either side is that innocent, and I don't think, so what appeared to have happened was Israel shot down or killed protesters. Protesters or soldiers? That's an interesting question. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
So my main gripe with this at the moment, first of all, my main problem with the whole Israel-Palestine conflict is that it's very difficult to get not an unbiased view, but a reasonable view. It's very typical to see like someone who's completely and avidly pro-Israel, just says the most ridiculous and outlandish things about the Palestinians, and then the exact opposite on the other side, like saying the Zion Nazis and using the three brackets and stuff like that, and on to imply Jews and very hectic anti-Semitism. So I find it very difficult to get a decent view of this. However, what are you going to say?
No, I was just going to agree with you. I mean, there's extremes on both sides, but there's no one like in the middle. Either you are anti-Israel and anti-Jewish, whatever, and you're anti-Semite and you don't understand the crimes of Hamas and whatever, or you are a complete social justice warrior and Israel is evil and they stole the land from the Palestinians and like there's no kind of looking at the facts. There's either you're with us or against us on both sides. That's the intention. The feeling, I guess.
It is broadly like that. I think the one exception to that is there may be a few high-up American politicians, like, say, Bernie Sanders. I do not think for a second that Bernie Sanders is on the pro-Israel side of things. But because he's in America, you can't take that political view. It's just too much of an extreme political view to be against Israel if you're a US politician, even on the left.
Yeah.
Anyway, what I was going to say was that the main problem I've had with the recent covering of events is that people have described these people as protesters. Now, these Hamas has identified the vast majority of the people killed by Israeli forces at the border there as being Hamas operatives. And I think it's what we know now from the way that Hamas operates is that they're really enjoying being on the camera, and they know that outlets like CNN and the New York Times are going to give them a sympathetic view when they just see, Israelis murdered Palestinians. They don't think of it as, a terrorist group which is trying to go into Israel to murder Jews with weapons and Molotov cocktails, burning kites with the swastika on it. Are these really peaceful protesters? I mean, I just find it so bizarre. And the trail of this by the media, I think, has been really horrendous. I think I probably would agree with Ben Shapiro. I think he's been going a little bit extreme if anybody listens to the Ben Shapiro show, but he's saying things like the New York Times and so on have been doing the PR work for a terrorist organization. Yeah, and I think he's kind of right there.
Yeah, I can, but also Ben Shapiro is for me too one-sided, and we can touch on this when we get to the next topic, which is the Iran deal, which I also know nothing about.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, the Iran deal, I'm equally a little bit ignorant, but this is a very contentious issue in American politics. I think one thing to recognize about Iran is that it's basically a terrorist government. Basically, they fund Hamas, they fund all the worst actors in the Middle East, and we are in now a bizarre situation where the Middle East region, I'm just including Iran when I say the Middle East here, has been polarized with people like Israel, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and the United States on the one side, and then Iran on the other, and they're becoming more of a regional power. The main objections to this Iran deal that I've heard from Republicans is that, first of all, a lot of it's based on sort of trust, and that we can't really be guaranteed that Iran is stopping its nuclear proliferation. And the other one is that as part of the deal, the United States is giving them billions and billions of dollars. And when they are funding terrorist organizations, you don't want to be giving that sort of money to a government that's doing that.
Yeah.
But I'm also a little bit ignorant because this is something which is just completely off the map of what's relevant here in South Africa.
Yeah.
However, we will see what will come. I don't think it's a train smash that Trump has done this, but I think let's give it, say, a year and see what developments come out of that.
What I think about the whole Iran thing is that I don't think, apparently part of the deal was that because of Iran was cut out of the global payment system known as SWIFT as a result of the sanctions, the US actually gave them hundreds of millions of dollars worth of physical gold and physical US dollar notes, which obviously is very easy to use to acquire nuclear material from states like North Korea or fund terrorists, etc., or buy oil drilling equipment. So, I mean, it probably wasn't a good deal. It was, Trump, I think it was at his discretion to recertify the deal every year. which he now obviously didn't choose to do. So I think this whole getting out of the Iran deal wasn't technically illegal. This is what I'm hearing. So I don't know whether it was good or not, or whether the world is a safer place, but that seems to be what's happened. So
yeah, you are right there. I mean, this was a deal which was done by executive authority. It should have gone through Congress, but it was too unpopular. So you are correct on that last point. Anyway, I think that's a good wrap-up of the recent headlines. Hopefully some people listen to us and take our advice and things. But thanks for chatting, and I suppose until next time when we talk about the next relevant issues of the day, we'll see how things go.
Well, thanks for listening to the 1 or 2 people who will listen to this. We wanted to do North Korea, but alas, there's no time. It's an important one and a fun one to talk about, so maybe we can leave that for next time. Plus, I'm sure lots of stupid stuff's bound to happen within the next week. So, yeah, hopefully we'll have another one next week. So, yeah, cool. Thanks for listening, guys. Cheers.
Cheers.